The Journey, once again. You're with Kev Polton for BMG Partners, and this time around Niki Strauss joins me, and an appropriate time of year to have you with us, Niki, because we'll get to that in a moment, but thank you for joining us for The Journey.
Thanks for having me.
And the reason being, your background is hairdresser, mum, but super talented singer, and the reason we're talking about this time of year is you're performing in both the Albury and Wodonga carols.
I am this year, yeah.
So
very exciting.
People will see you, they might know your face from that before they realise what your name is and then hear this conversation of the journey. So we always start with your heritage to the area, whether you were born here or brought up. Tell us your ties to Albury, Wodonga and surrounds.
So I was born here in Albury. I lived here until I think I was about 8, and then we moved up to the North Coast with my mum, and my dad stayed here. So my dad is Bruce Lynch. We have a little giggle about it. He was like the wedding singer back in the 80s and like late 80s. So you would see him at the commercial club. He would do the Sunday. Do you remember the buffets? And they used to do the draws.
Yes.
Yeah. So he used to do that most weeks. So us as kids, we would go with him, and we'd get really excited when we got to do the numbers, and so that was really great. So he did that. So I moved to the North Coast and went to a few different schools up there, but then one of them was a school that really majored in performing arts. So that was probably like I'd always sung with Dad at home and around. My grandma was also on stage. She sang with Footscray City Band and did a lot of musical theatre and that. But it was good. But then we lived up there for a bit, and then we came back just before I started Year 12. So moving from New South Wales to Victoria, I had to start a HS like VCE, what it was again. So started Year 11 again. And yeah, we've been here ever since, which is good.
And went on to become a hairdresser?
Yes, went on to become a hairdresser. So life took a little bit of a trajectory. So being at a performing arts school, obviously I was very heavily that way involved. And then I moved here and probably didn't feel quite so supported in the arts back then when I was at school. So then I'm like, I'm just going to be a hairdresser. It'll be a really good thing to fall back on, and then I'll come back to singing. And now I've flipped again. So...
And let's talk about that, because you've performed in some of our local productions as well, haven't you?
I have, yes.
So where would we have seen you in those?
So my first back to stage, if we go, like I say I retired for a little while, like as you do when you're 20, like 18. And my first back was actually in Les Mis with David Todd and what was I think it was the other theatre company at the time. Please, I'm sorry, David, if that's wrong. But it's now Livid Productions. My dad had suddenly lost his partner, his wife at the time. And then this musical came up and he rang me and he said, let's do it. And I'm like, yep, no worries. I was singing with a corporate band at the time. I thought, yep, let's have a go. So we went in, and I don't know if you know the story of Les Mis, but we just sort of auditioned and went, we're just going to go and we're going to have a good time. We're just going to meet some new people. It'll be great. And then my dad ended up being cast as Jean Valjean, which is the lead. And then I was cast as Cosette, who is actually his daughter in the musical. So that was a really lovely introduction back to theatre, and it's something that we always talk about, that we will never have that opportunity again. We made some beautiful friendships that, are still very special now. And I'm working with David Todd again with Chicago this year, which will be on in March. So that'll be great.
Isn't that always the way where you go, what could go wrong? This is what we're looking to get out of it. And then next thing you know, lead roles.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But it was so special. Like, it was so special. So then I did that one and then did more work with the band. So I sang with NFI, which was 9 Fine Individuals at the time. And, we did that for years and years and years. And we sang Parliament House and we did corporate stuff at Threadbow. Like, we were always travelling. You would have seen us at like the SSNA and Paddy's and lots of weddings. It was very wedding heavy at the time. And then I had kids and stopped for a while. All this time I continued to teach. But then when I had Maybelle, who's now almost 12, I had a bit of a break for a while from all of that and just taught instead. So she would come to singing lessons with me, which the kids thought was great.
Sounds like you like long hours on your feet.
Yeah, I
if
do.
you're hairdressing and then performing after dark, it sounds like a lot of time on your feet.
It is. My feet hate me now. You'll always see me in like sensible shoes.
I love it. So when you're not, so you're sort of taking I guess the performing side of things seriously, and you're doing a lot more of it. Is that a hobby? Is that a release? Like when you're not working as such, is that what do you consider?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm really lucky in the fact that I always was hairdressing full time, and then I would sing or teach part time, which was always great, and I love it so much, and I love performing. And then I flipped probably about 5 years ago and started teaching more and hairdressing less. But I don't ever see either as being work or hobby. Like I always wake up in the morning and I love going to the salon, and I don't see it as work or, oh no, that's work, or I don't see going to teach as work, or, oh, I don't want to do that today. And then when I go to the theatre on the weekends, it's still not work. Like it's all seems to be a hobby, and it's just a bonus that I get paid for it.
Yeah. Which
I guess is, something very rare that people get to do. So it's all the same, and I love it.
And so really work's the outlet. You found something you love doing. The old find something you love doing, you'll never work a day in your life.
Pretty much. And that's what I feel like I'm doing. Like I don't feel like I'm ever working, except for paperwork. I hate paperwork. Like I'm one of those, you remember the Jimmy Rees thing where he's like the musician and he's like, yeah, great gig. That's awesome. I think it's like an ad for a accounting thing. And then a few months down the track, he's like, oh, I don't have any money. Oh, remember that gig and I forgot to invoice you? That's totally me. Yeah.
So no business advice from you then?
No,
Niki.
don't take any at all.
What do you consider to be your biggest achievement in life so far?
Well, my kids. Mm-hmm. Yep, my kids and my family. We work really well as a team. Glenn is a ballroom dancer and he owns a ballroom dance studio, so we're both very creative in that side of things, and our kids are too. So Mabel's a ripper singer. We laugh that she's going to trip me up for a role. Thankfully, she's not my age and I won't ever have to compete with her on stage for a role. So they both dance, they both sing, but they're both really confident kids in who they are. So, and I think that's the best thing, is that they see us pursuing passions and jobs, for lack of a better word, that we love doing. So I love that they are now going and doing the things that they enjoy too. But then it's also really great that I don't measure my achievements on what I do. I tend to measure them on what my students do and what my kids do. So I've got students who are, releasing CDs overseas or studying at VCA, really high-level musical theatre stuff, working on stage in Melbourne. And I love that. Like, I really love that. And we stay in touch all the time, and yeah, it's great. I'm a crier, like I'm a supportive crier. It's good.
Nothing wrong with that. Who do you admire, and who do you admire the most, and why?
So I have a lot of admiration for the people around me. Like I love seeing them do what they love. I'm a real yes person. And I'm a bit of a, you need to do this. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, you need to do this. So I love seeing people do the things that they love, no matter what it is. So I think I can't really narrow it down to one person. I've been really lucky with the influences in my life with like my mum and my grandma, like both my grandmas. They always did what they loved. And as women, they're really strong, independent women. So I think I admire that they were always, let's do this, we love this. So, yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, I like it. The quotes we like to touch on in the journey, often I don't think we've had anyone double up on the same sort of mantra. Mm-hmm. But is there something that you live your life by, or is it a couple of things you might have? It's completely over to you.
So I really love, the only thing better than singing is more singing. So it's one of those things that everybody can sing, and like everybody can sing. So like everybody can sing. It's if you have the heart and the passion for it, then yeah, you're a singer. So it brings so much joy to people. So
that's a good thing to maybe stop on for a little bit because it's not a skill that we've had to discuss on the journey before, singing. So you said anybody can sing, and everybody I think's heard that phrase. What is it that makes somebody not sing well? Like, what is it that you're doing when you're coaching someone or helping them discover a voice? Is it confidence? What is it that makes people maybe not pitch perfect to start with?
A lot of it is confidence. So everyone has a speaking pitch. So when you speak, often when we start, we get people to count. So you'll count 1, 2, 3, and then you'll show them like on the piano or the keyboard where they're sitting at a pitch. Then you start to bend that pitch with some slides, using different phonetics, tongue placement, mouth placement, the way you pronounce your words. So if you were to sing mine, like you wouldn't sing mine or mine with an accent, you would stretch the vowel a little bit. So a lot of it is people having the confidence within their voice. Like some students you might sing with them the whole time for like 3 months, 6 months, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I think I'm okay now. And they start going on their own. So it's I teach student-led lessons, so I'll always guide how they go. But some people might have a really great big range. Some people might have a really great small range, but it's finding songs and rhythms and pronunciation that works for them so they feel confident.
Sounds simple, right?
Look, I'm gonna say it is, but
I'm sure practice makes perfect.
Yeah, always.
There's a mantra.
Always.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. What's a tough decision that you had to make in life?
Look, I think there's always lots of tough decisions. It's always risky when you go out on your own. It's always risky to know that you're doing the right thing. But like I've said, I'm a yes person. I'm like, it's fine. What's the worst that can happen? Is always my thing. Like, and seriously, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, so you do this and it doesn't work. It's fine. Let's just pivot again. So I tend to always go, yep, let's go. And my friends are like we'll talk about doing something. Like we did a singing quarantine choir, and we've been talking about doing it. Like that's COVID. Everyone did nothing. We were just about to go on stage for We Will Rock You, and we all got shut down. And then we were doing nothing. Performing arts was nowhere. We had to pivot. As a singing teacher, I had to pivot to Zoom. Glenn had to pivot to online for dancing. And I could have quite easily gone, this is rubbish. What am I going to do? The salon had to shut down. Like everything just stopped, and we could not work from home in a normal capacity. So instead of going, oh, this is garbage, I rang up Steve, who had Blackline at the time, and I said, right, I need a mic. We got to set myself up. And then we started pivoting to Zoom. But then we were missing the contact that we got at rehearsals for our show. So then my friends Chantel and Lauren and I were just on the phone, as we do, because that's what we do. We're on a video call, and I'm like, oh, can we do like a choir or something? Like, let's do something. And then Loz was like, yeah, we can do that. Like, we'll do arrangements and we'll teach them to people. And then Cassie, who's here, she's like, oh, well, I'll mix them if people record their stuff. So next minute, Friday nights is like what started as our friend was nearly 350 people logging on in our group. We didn't often get all that many voices recording, but they loved the community that we were building on a Friday night. So all of a sudden people had something at the end of the week when they've been at home all the time to do something. And we would do vocals, we would do film clips, which are all on a YouTube channel. And then we're on like the Today Show one day. They got hold of it and they're like, what are you doing? We're like, we're just having a good time. Because you can either make a decision, you can make a hard decision to go, this is rubbish, I'm going to wallow for a bit, or I'm going to make a hard decision, and how can I turn this into a positive and pivot? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm always told I have rose-coloured glasses on, and I probably do all the time. But I'd much rather live that way than not.
It's one of the greatest compliments. Someone says that. For some people, it's okay to have rose-coloured glasses on, Niki. Sliding door moments. You've almost got one there that you've sort of described. I mean, that's sort of, I guess, which fork in the road do we take here?
Yep.
But have you got any in life where you sort of vividly remember going, geez, I could either go that way, and you've explained you're a yes person, so I'm guessing if the opportunity's there, you've just taken it. But have you ever sort of thought, what if I had have gone the other way?
Yeah, so, and that's probably a real thing when we shifted, when we moved back home. So when we were in Lismore, so I was HSC performance, vocals, all that. We had some instructors from the WAPA, Western Australian Performing Arts, come across, and they assessed us for our HSC thing at a retreat. And I had one of the assessors come up to me and say, we would grant you early entry to our course at the time. And if you know anything about the performing arts in Western Australia, it doesn't actually happen. They don't like to take you before you're 21. And within half an hour, I had to have the conversation with my teacher that we were moving states. So that was a real, if I had have stayed, what would have happened? But then instead of going, oh, well, what would have happened? I'm like, well, look at what I've done now. So if I had have done that, I wouldn't be doing the things I am now. I wouldn't have the incredible students that I have now. I wouldn't have the community that I have now in the area. So that's probably the biggest sliding doors thing. And I guess from then I've always just sort of said yes to things. Hey, would you, this band needs a singer, would you go? Sure. I rocked up to a wedding 3 weeks ago, I think, and I met the guitarist, Nathan, who's lovely, at 4:00, and we did a 2-hour wedding set at 4:30. We'd never had a rehearsal together, ever. And I'm like, sure, someone's wedding, let's go. So we always just say yes. So I try and teach my students to always say yes from the very start. I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? Just do all the things. All the things.
Yeah, I use it's not life or death.
Yeah.
So the decision that you're making at that point in time, is it causing anything too catastrophic that people can't handle?
Yep.
And if it isn't, what's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst? Yeah.
So I love talking to people that have clearly, particularly on the journey when they've found what they're doing is what they love. Because some people do it just because they've fallen into it and that's what they have to do.
Yep.
And then they eventually love it. And often when you talk about going back to being a kid, so when you were at preschool or was it the arts that you sort of thought you'd do then? What did you think as a kid that you wanted to do when you grew up?
I was always going to be a singer.
Yeah,
okay. I was always going to be a singer. So always, I loved it. My gran was a singer. My dad is a singer. I was always going to be a singer. But I nearly didn't, because I went to a lot of different high schools before I settled, and just for various reasons we moved quite a lot. And I tried out for a choir at this one particular school, and she turned around and it was Happy Birthday. Happy Birthday was and I was so nervous. And she turned around and she said, look, I don't think singing's for you. And I went, oh. And then I thought about it and I'm like, actually, no, it is. This is what I am. So I ended up leaving the school later. But then I went back and I did work experience at the school, and she had no idea who I was. And it validated who I was as a performer to go back and go, you know what, you were wrong. So I guess that's another reason why I'm always if you want to do this, let's go. I think I was 12 at the time. That could have stopped me from doing all the things that I love. So you'll always take that with you, but it'll turn you into, no, it's definitely what I want to do and you're wrong. So, yeah.
When you're growing up whether it's primary school age through to high school years and what have you, adolescence, I think we all admit that we never really listen to our parents.
Yeah.
But if you could give yourself advice, like a young you at any point in time, what advice now would you have given yourself then? What things do you think you've learnt along the way?
Just to say yes to all the things. Like, just don't let other people's opinions of you stop you from what you want to do. Like, don't let other people's insecurities impact the way that you want to perform. Because as a performer, as a young person, like, you do get shut down a lot by your peers who perhaps aren't as confident. It's that natural reflex that some people have that, oh, what are you doing that for? What do you want to do that for? You're not that good. Like, so it would be to just stop listening to those people and keep doing the work.
I guess that's the advice. What would you do differently if you had your time again?
I wouldn't do anything differently. And I know that's terrible. I wouldn't do anything differently. I think everything that I have done has had like a lesson or a blessing. I call it a blessing, like a blessing in disguise. So
I love
do you
that.
like
I've never heard that phrase before.
Yeah.
A blessing.
A blessing. Yep.
Yeah,
yep. A
good.
blessing. So every lesson or obstacle or whatever that I've had there's always been a reason for it. And instead of going, okay, well, what's this? What's the blessing in this? Where is this leading me to go? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this
See,
is
rose-coloured glasses.
This is learning from mistakes. It's sort of a few things wrapped up into one. The blessing.
Yeah. Yep.
Is it trademarked? Have we got that?
No, I haven't trademarked it.
I think we might need to. It could almost become a hashtag or something after this episode, that's for sure. Thinking ahead, I'm looking forward to hearing you answer this, considering you said you're the sort of person who hates administration and would maybe have realised later that you hadn't done an invoice. Mm-hmm. But thinking ahead, what does the next, say, 5 to 10 years look like, the next chapters of what you're doing?
Well, I feel like you know me well enough that I don't really have a plan. We just, which is, I don't know. I know a lot of people have that, yes, in this amount of time I want to be here and I want to be here, but I just feel so lucky to be able to be doing what I am doing. Like my kids will be, Maybelle will be, well, I don't know, I guess finished high school, 5 years, much like Jazz. Artie will be at high school. Hopefully just being able to continue to give opportunities to like my students and myself and keep saying yes. And like, you just can't put a plan on it. Like you might get a phone call and it'll be, okay, well, I'm going to be here now. So yeah.
So I'm sensing that you're feeling, if it's worked so far, why change it?
Pretty much. I'd probably like to have my kitchen renovated. That'd be nice. That's probably next on the plan.
It's some of those things that stay on the to-do list for a very long time.
Yeah.
Glenn
gets a lot of, hey, I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he probably sits there thinking, what's next?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm here to serve.
Yeah.
So you've touched on the COVID a fair bit, and we're trying to milk this out of the journey because it brought us to a halt as well. This exact series, for several months, we stopped having conversations. Mm-hmm. But when we've resumed them again over the last couple of years, almost 3 years, I feel like they've been a very different conversation to what we initially had. I must one day sit down and go back through and look at the first 15, 20 interviews and then come back to the most recent ones, because we talk about the impact of a pandemic, the significant moment in history, which we know we've read about with Spanish flu, and even then we've had to sort of bring ourselves up to speed because no one specialised on that in school in our generation. But we've all been interested to see what the parallels were. What have you learnt about yourself and about life and everything around you sort of during the pandemic?
Yeah, I've learned that we're a little bit more resilient than we thought. So I think like everyone's had their own impacts through the pandemic, but for two people who have two young kids and are both in the performing arts industry, it's really hard. Like it's you lose that identity of yourself, who is used to being around people and used to, helping people and doing all of that you're like, okay, well, how can I do that without physically being with people? Like, I was out of schools for 12 months minimum. So, and then I'd come into schools to teach the kids and then back out again, or I could teach, because singing is a high risk activity. It was high risk. So it took so long to get singing back face to face. And even now there's still a lot of, like, we have air purifiers. I still wear a mask when I teach singing. Like, all of those things still apply even now. So whereas for the rest of everyone it's still back to normal, there's still quite a risk associated with what I do as a profession with students and in the schools that I go in. And so it's not like, well, it's great to be all back to face. It shows that you can be resilient as a community and still inspire and still do your things. But I hate it. I'm such a people person. I've got friends who loved it. They thrived being home. I hate it. Like, I love my house and I love being home to some extent. But I'm such an extrovert that I really thrive on being around people, and Glenn does too. So that's probably one thing that we really learnt, is that if we're stuck at home for ages, we're like, oh, I don't like this.
And I think those that had memory of post-war times or listened to their grandparents even, and they knew that still getting dressed up in whatever frock you could source or afford or whatever it might have been at the time, and still go out to a dance or go to a film or whatever it might have been, or the escapism that was provided that arts give you, we couldn't do during this time. So it was a completely different experience, and no one could really get their mind around how that was working. I guess we've probably wrapped up a fair bit there in that 25 minutes or so, Niki, and got a really good picture of you being a yes person. But we usually like to wrap up these journeys with just some lightheartedness and the oldie but the goodie. If you could have anyone over dinner, say 3 people, you can name more if you wanted to, dead or alive, who would they be?
I'd like to have Etta James and Aretha Franklin for dinner. I'd have to menu log it though. And hopefully it goes to the same address.
You've got a history of that, haven't you?
I do have a history. Yeah, I do. Yep.
And so what would be on the menu log, sweet or savoury?
Always sweet. I'm terrible. Sweet, and then like a charcuterie board. Yeah.
I love it. And a snapshot for a normal weekend. What are your plans this weekend, for example?
So my normal weekends are fairly full on. So this weekend I have what am I doing? Oh, I've got my Christmas party on Friday, which is exciting. We're going to the races for the salon, which is great because the girls are amazing. And then Saturday I'm teaching, but Sunday I actually have my first student showcase that I'm holding. Normally I just do little ones at the schools or a little one at home just with the family, but this is the first sort of large one. So I've got 3 sessions and down at the Albury and Wodonga Theatre Company, which is great. So we're really looking forward to that. So yeah.
You won't have much downtime, I'm sure, by the time you fit everything that we've discussed today in. Nope. But is there anything that you could recommend we would binge on? Like, is there any TV series that you've discovered or other podcasts or things like that when you go, this really is worth people finding out about?
I don't watch television. I don't really watch TV. I really, I like to, and I like the idea of it, but I get really sidetracked. My brain has all the things. I teach for Sharon Hill's School of Performing Arts too. So my brain is always on music or arrangements or singing or students. And so no, but I am a fantasy novel reader.
Right.
Yep.
So what would you recommend? What's your favourite fantasy novel, or is there a series of novels?
Favourite ever is Sarah Douglas. I absolutely love her writing. But recently I'm reading Sarah J. Maas again.
Okay.
which is really nice.
So for anybody
just
that's in that same realm
cruisy.
of just sitting down, chilling out with a book, there's a couple of
Yep.
recommendations.
Yep.
Well, Niki Strauss, it's been a pleasure. I have known you for some years, but to sit you down here and have a chat about the journey, really appreciate you being so open and sharing it with us. And thanks so much for being part of it.
Thank you.